Millennials, if you're similar to me, you're an independent for one of the following reasons. You don't trust the government, you question the establishment and institutions, or you agree that political parties are bull. In today's episode, I want to explain why taking independentvoting.org's latest survey, Confronting a New Reality, Independent Speak Out, is not only crucial to the indie voter movement, but also to our generation as millennials. So stay tuned for this episode. In case you haven't noticed, I'm Jarrell Corley, host and creative director of The Independent, a YouTube channel dedicated to bringing you updates from the independent voters movement. Eventually, I'd also like to talk about my beliefs and viewpoints as well. But first, a quick side note about that. There will be times when a portion of you might not agree with everything I have to say, but that's okay, because being a millennial is about authenticity and being your true self, even though most of us are fake as hell. But hey, if you don't know anything about independentvoting.org, I want you to know that this organization was created on the premise that people from different backgrounds and political beliefs could work together to change the most pressing issue facing our democracy today: closed primaries. I am so against establishment politics because it's so cliquish. I mean, establishment politics is like Mean Girls. But instead of a bunch of hot chicks in miniskirts being petty, you've got Nasty Nancy and all of her colleagues on both sides of the aisles pointing the finger at each other. Not to mention, these politicians have no personality whatsoever and are boring. I mean, have you ever hung out with politicians? Parliament is much more interesting than Congress.
Mr. Robertson! Mr. Robertson! Calm yourself, man! The lion must get back in its den! Prime Minister!
Not to mention George Clinton. American politicians can be some of the most dry and uninteresting bodies in the room. Probably because they are too busy hiding their colorful side out of fear of being criticized by the mainstream media. Oh, how freedom of the press in America exists, but not so. Thus is the unfortunate reality of the situation, and this is why we need to get active. And now, without further delay, let me heed the tone of the directors getting all Steven Spielberg and Indiana Jones on me, cracking their whip, and let's get this ball rolling. If you had not noticed, independentvoting.org released a survey about a month ago entitled Confronting a New Reality, Independent Speak Out. As of now, I believe we've collected over 3,000 signatures or so. We are trying to collect around 5,000 signatures before the summer's end, and we really appreciate your help. Hopefully, the winter season will let up shortly, and we will be able to hit the streets once this COVID-19 scare is long gone. Anywho, President of independentvoting.org, Jackie Salick, asked me to make this video explaining why it is important that we as millennials take this brief survey. So, let's get on with the show. Millennials are oftentimes wrongly accused of being self-centered, spoiled brats who complain too much about their circumstances rather than finding solutions. Although we weren't handed the best of circumstances, with a nice portion of us graduating either at the beginning or shortly after the Great Recession, I can empathize with both sides of the argument. As one who is on the cusp of the millennial generation, I understand it is a difficult time trying to start adulthood under the present circumstances. However, I also believe a large portion of the problem could be our generation's inability to adapt. Nevertheless, I also believe we are not given credit for the fact that our generation is actually more civically involved and volunteer-oriented than generations before us. Despite the bad name given to our generation by boomers and Generation X, we must remember that we are incredibly resourceful and technologically savvy. We are definitely problem solvers and are hungry for the opportunity to make a difference. For this generation has produced many recent influencers who have influenced the world for better or for worse. For instance, Mark Zuckerberg. We also have Greta Thunberg, if she even counts. I think she's with Generation Z, but who cares anyway? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Candace Owens, and many, many more, whom I'm completely unaware of because, like you, I'm a self-absorbed millennial. Fortunately, if anything is to be learned from these recent examples of how millennials have the ability to step into more self-absorbed stardom, it is that you can step up to the plate and make a difference too. With that being said, we must understand that it is up to us to make the change that we seek. The time to act is now. We can no longer afford to sit back and watch as the generations before us make short-term decisions that will have long-term consequences for our generation. Millennials will soon be the largest voter bloc in the country after baby boomers shed off more numbers in the upcoming years. My hat goes off to the greatest generation to ever set foot on American soil, as I have been more inspired by members of their generation than my own, as I was born an old soul and will probably die a young one. What will be, and we must act in the spirit of the nightly marauders and take what must be had, for our future is at stake. So how can we start on this path to take what is ours? Well, for starters, we can start by participating in this survey. The constitutional amendment that will appear on one thing.
Yo, man, this guy's interesting, man. I really like his videos.
Yeah. The president. No, let's see.
Floridians will have their say about the stronghold.
Yo, you look familiar. Do I know you? What's your name?
I'm Jarrell Corley.
Oh, you the Independent. What are you doing here?
Oh, I'm just here on behalf of the American voters, trying to spread the word about the independent voter movement. But if you don't mind, I'd like to take a few minutes of your time. Do you mind taking the survey real quick?
Yeah, I don't mind at all.
All right, thanks, brother, thanks. So how is participating in a survey helping us make change? Think of this survey as reconnaissance. This survey will assist the multitude of organizations fighting for open primaries understand the needs and wants of independent voters. If we can understand who we are as a voting bloc, we can create a collective identifiable message that resonates with other independent voters who share our sentiments. This survey will assist the multitude of organizations fighting for open primaries understand the needs and wants of independent voters. If we can understand who we are as a voting bloc, we can create a collective identifiable message that resonates with other independent voters who share our sentiments. For if we cannot connect with other independent voters, how will we do numbers and grow our movement? If we cannot grow our movement, how will we make noise? If we can't make noise, how will our voices be heard? And finally, if our voices can't be heard, how will we fight for the change we seek? This survey is critical as we move forward in the fight to change our democracy. If we are able to understand what we as independents want, leaders within the movement can organize separate organizations, move as a singular unit around the issue that matters most, opening the primaries so all voters can vote. The movement is counting on your participation, so please participate. So act now and click on the link in the description section below. When you take the survey, you will notice section 4 moves into the question of the movement's future and what actions we should take next. In past presidential cycles, 1988, 1996, 2008, and 2012, there were attempts to move forward on the road to the White House. Some efforts were more short-lived than others, and in 1988, Dr. Lenore Finale kicked it off and became the first woman and first African-American to have ballot access in all 50 states. In 1996, during the Reform Party nominating process, Ross Perot was the third-party candidate nominee and also won ballot access in all 50 states. Although neither of these candidates won, their actions were influential in future attempts to run presidential candidates outside the two major party primaries. In 2008 and 2012, similar reform movements tried to establish a separate primary to select a candidate. However, both attempts failed. Regardless of this failure, it is important to remember the wise words of the late R&B star Aaliyah. If at first you don't succeed, brush yourself off and try again. Brush yourself off and try again. Try again. Again. Thus, we need to try again, but only with your help. We want to know whether Independent should start organizing its own primary to choose a presidential candidate to take the White House in 2024. Obviously, this would be quite the feat, and even more so because of the extra restrictions placed on independent candidates. But wouldn't it be groundbreaking if Independents started organizing primaries more often to gain momentum and 1 year sweep in underneath the two major political parties and take the White House? Marking one of the most important moments in American history, a moment so monumental that it could potentially open the floodgates for positive change. And I don't mean cosmetic and meaningless change, but real, actual change. Change unchained by the tentacles of the two major parties and the special interest groups that buy our politicians and ignore the will of the people. Change that could actually inspire you to dream and create a prosperous future, not only for you, but for generations to come. Yes, this will be a marvelous, wonderful occurrence, but first things first. We must gauge interest to gain your backing, so our actions won't be in vain. So please, take the survey. This is a critical time in our nation's history, and we are living in unprecedented times. The handling of this pandemic is yet another polarizing issue, further dividing our nation. The pandemic is quickly manifesting from a primarily health issue to a serious social and economic issue. We are on the brink of historic levels of unemployment, and Congress just increased the national debt by $2 trillion with the passage of the recent stimulus bill. There are even talks about guaranteed income. Lord only knows the impact this will have on the national debt if it passes. We can continue the long list of examples regarding the terrible shape our country is in. But enough with the doom and gloom. This critical moment highlights the inability of our politicians to govern efficiently and manage the country properly. Despite all that is going on, our politicians are still carrying on in their petty ways, pushing blame off on one another instead of actually doing what matters most, working on behalf of the American people. Why is this, you say? This continues to be the case because our country has a two-party system where the parties have ultimate control over the election process. Our current system forces our politicians to be accountable to the parties, not the American people. We must seize this crisis as a moment of opportunity to organize and move forward as a unit to show the world independent voters will change the course of America's democracy. Our founding fathers were terrified of this very situation we have found ourselves in, a situation where political parties hijack the government from the people and run rampant, putting the interests of the parties above those of the people. We must seize the moment and fight hard and let the parties know there will be no more of their behavior. No more antics, no more finger pointing, and most importantly, no more closed primaries. We must start now, and we can start by taking this survey. We have quite the feat ahead of us as we are talking of holding an all-independence primary to select a presidential candidate in 2024. Winning will be damn near impossible, but let's look at a few memories which a lot of us thought were impossible not too long ago. If you were to ask Americans in the 80s, would there ever be a black president, most of you would have said no. However, we did elect Barack Obama for his first term in 2008. If you asked Americans in 2016 if President Trump would have beat Hillary Clinton, most of you probably would have said no. But then we elected him. In the great words of Napoleon, impossible is only in the dictionary of fools. Therefore, let's forget this word even exists. Of course, if we run, we want to win. But we must remember that winning is not the most important issue at hand here. Growing our movement and shedding light on how closed primaries impede our democracy is what is most important. We can only do this if we come together and unify behind this message. All this starts with this simple survey. Closed primaries stifle democracy and voter participation. All this can start with this simple survey. So please take the time to participate, to give our colleagues the information they need to help us move forward and spread our message and grow the movement. The link is below in the description section, so please click on it and take the survey. Remember to free your mind, and until next time, free the voter.